My name is Lana, and I've been an international tour guide for 12 years. On paper, my job is holding a sign counting heads and checking passports. In reality, every trip is a peculiar classroom. I teach people about borders, and the world teaches me about humility. That morning, Bus 27 pulled up to the curb outside the airport. I held a sign that read, Passport to Earth. My group appeared bustling and chatty like a first-day class Mark, a PE teacher from Ohio, Becky, a young photographer with a sweet tooth, Tyler, an impulsive but good-hearted IT guy, Aunt Carol, the auntie type with a pocketful of peppermint candies, Coach Dan, a basketball coach who loves to argue, Jess, a wide-eyed college freshman, Tom, a grocery clerk who takes earnest photos, and Noah, a former student of mine on a gap year to find himself. Passports for a quick check, please, I said in my well-worn tour guide voice. Mark waved a shiny driver's license. Why a passport? We're going to Canada, not crossing an ocean. I smiled and pointed at the map taped to the bus window. Borders aren't chalk lines on a field. Canada is another country. Your driver's license lets you drive a car, not drive through a law. Mark chuckled and scratched his head. All right. Guess I've got first period geography today? The group laughed and hauled their luggage on board. We reached Vienna under afternoon light that poured like honey over red rooftops. A cafe sat like a music box on a quiet corner. Becky inhaled the scent of coffee and said to me, Thank goodness you speak English. People here must learn our language a lot. Austrians primarily speak German. I answered gently, setting down her cappuccino. Becky blinked like she'd just heard a plot twist. Wait. Germany is the country next door. Right. Think New York and Texas, same language, different states. Becky blushed, then laughed, and took a long sip. In that case, I'll have another cup of, sorry, I assumed, with a side of Apfelstrudel. In Paris, the hotel desk phone chirped non-stop. My outlet's the wrong shape, Tyler grumbled. We invented electricity in America. I grabbed my trusty adapter, my travel talisman, and knocked on his door. What the world invented, I smiled, is conversion. Plugs and voltage are like languages, nobody's wrong, just different. Tyler stared at the tiny adapter as if it were magic. So, I don't need an electrician to rewire France. He snorted at himself. From then on, Tyler became the group's unofficial adapter engineer. If a charger didn't fit, he volunteered. Rome greeted us with warm breeze and shoes tapping cobblestones. In the Roman Forum, Uncle Energy Hank touched a weathered column and asked, Why did the Romans leave it? Unfinished. Because time is the second architect, I said. They finished it thousands of years ago. The rest is wind, rain, war, and the patience of people who restore. Hank stayed quiet for a long time, then pulled his son close. Write this down. Some things get more beautiful once you know how many seasons they've survived. Night fell on the plane to Sydney. The map on the screen flashed, summer. Aunt Carol waved me over. Lana, the map says summer, but December's winter. I took out the travel globe I always carry and gave it a gentle tilt. Southern Hemisphere. The Earth leans just enough to swap the seasons. Aunt Carol hugged the little globe like a newly learned secret and laughed. No wonder. I packed a suitcase full of parkas. In London, a little bookshop glowed on a damp brick street. Noah held 1984, hesitating. Do you have this in English? I mean American English. Same house, different rooms, I winked. They say flat. We say apartment. If you read both Englishes, you're 2 steps ahead. Noah laughed and tucked the book into his backpack like a key he planned to use. The train climbed into the Alps. White clouds scarfed the peaks. Aunt Carol stared at a thunderous waterfall and whispered, Who turns that on every morning? The bus erupted in laughter. I leaned in. Gravity is the chief engineer. She blushed, then nodded to herself. Okay, from now on I'll be careful with the questions that only seem simple. Tokyo glimmered under neon. The currency exchange counter shone like a mirror. Coach Dan frowned. Why not call yen the Japanese dollar to keep it simple? And why isn't the exchange rate 1 to 1? Currency names are part of identity, I said. If the world always switches to our convenience, we lose the chance to learn their language. Dan nodded and tucked the yen into his wallet the way you tuck away a lesson. In Dublin, the pub smelled of old wood and fiddle strings. A traveler in our group accidentally ordered a cocktail name with painful historical baggage. The barkeep paused, then kindly explained that here, some words aren't just letters, they're scars. The traveler glanced at me mortified. I murmured, "In some places, respect is the best drink on the menu." He switched orders, lifted his glass, and let that be his apology. On the walk back, Jess tugged my sleeve. Lana is Africa, a country or a continent. People say both. We stopped under a street lamp and opened a map. A continent, 54 countries. So many languages that sometimes silence is the only one they share. Jess's eyes rounded. I think I need a brain adapter too. Paris again. The gallery buzzed like a held breath. In front of the Mona Lisa, Tom muttered, "It's so small? How is it so famous it isn't size?" I said. "It's the story mystery theft, that half smile." Tom stepped back and lowered his camera. The photo he took had no faces in the frame, just the painting quiet as a held note. She deserves a little room to breathe. London blurred between drizzle and sun. Mark held up his road trip plan. I'm driving London to Edinburgh, then to Belfast. All still. England, right. 3 countries in one United Kingdom, I said. Mark rubbed his chin and grinned, which means my trip just got smarter. In Florence, the air felt like warm cotton. Becky asked me to find deep dish pizza. I told her about Naples and Rome, about dough yeast and stone ovens, how time matters more than thickness. She bit into a thin, blistered slice, and her eyes lit up. So, improvement doesn't always mean more. Sometimes it means truer to where it was born. A boat skimmed the glass-green waters of Halong Bay. Islands rose and fell like sleeping dragons. Tyler blurted, "A resort here would be packed." The boatman smiled, eyes squinting into the sun. "If everyone's a guest who's left to be home," Tyler fell silent. That night he told me, "Maybe places are beautiful because some corners refuse to fit our frames." Reykjavik. 11 a.m. The sky still pewter. Aunt Carol grabbed my hand. "Is the sun late for work?" I talked about latitude and the Earth's tilt. She giggled. "I should replace the batteries in my brain's clock." On the train from Brussels to Amsterdam, coach, Dan traced the map. 2 hours, several countries. Doesn't living so close get tense? What if you step over the line by accident? Living close is how you learn to yield, I said. Borders are lines drawn by law. The distance between people is drawn by how we speak to each other. In Athens, Jess stared at Greek letters carved into stone. Alpha, beta. I thought those were just frat letters. I told her about the alphabet's origins and philosophers who weighed their ideas with those very symbols. She let out a small, "Oh," like peeling tape off a window and seeing clearly. Bern, a cheese shop bright with brass scales. Tom tasted Gruyere and frowned. "Why no holes like Swiss cheese back home?" The shopkeeper smiled, kind as milk. "Holes are one style, not a nationality." Tom blushed and snapped a photo of a solid wheel of cheese, captioning it for himself. "The day I learned the world doesn't have to look like my supermarket." Late that night, we circled up in the hotel lounge with cups of hot chocolate. Noah spun my little globe and stopped on Russia. "It's huge," he whispered. "When I was a kid, I thought, maybe it should be divided up to be fair." I looked at him. "Borders aren't drawn with a ruler, Noah. They're sweat and scars and compromises and pain. Plenty has been divided at prices we never want to pay again." He paused, then nodded. "Maybe fairness isn't on a map, it's in how we treat the person in front of us." Our last day, I handed out small hand-drawn certificates, no bigger than postcards. Each carried a note marked borders are real, but kindness needs no visa. Becky, one language can live in many homes, don't make anyone move out. Tyler, a tiny adapter can bridge two worlds. Aunt Carol, gravity turns on waterfalls, humility turns on smiles. Coach Dan, short distances can bring hearts closer. Jess, Africa is bigger than you imagined, and so are you. Tom, beauty isn't measured in inches, it's measured in story. Noah, don't divide the world with a ruler, gather it with your conduct. They laughed. I raised a hand. Graduation ritual. Ask one question you used to be afraid to ask. The room hummed. Why is December hot in Sydney? Why do some cheeses have no holes? Why isn't every currency called a dollar? How can a small painting be so famous? Why keep some places wild? No one mocked anyone else. Only the soft chorus of "oh, that makes sense," breathing in and out like a lullaby. The next morning, we stood in the lobby, each person towing a suitcase and a slightly new version of themselves. Mark squeezed my hand. Back home, I'm teaching a different lesson. The rules change when you step off your field. Becky hugged me. I'll take photos with fewer words, let the world speak. Tyler held up his adapter. I'm keeping this on my desk to remind me the problem usually isn't the outlet, it's the connection. Aunt Carol pressed her last peppermint pack into my palm. Thanks for being patient with the silly questions because the kid in us is still learning. Coach Dan patted my shoulder. We say, no pain, no gain. But I think this trip was no listening, no learning. Jess hugged me. I'm pinning a map of Africa above my desk so every morning I see a bigger world. Tom handed me his Mona Lisa photo with no people in the frame. In case you forget, sometimes stepping back is how you move closer. Noah lingered at the end, quiet. He lifted the little globe I'd lent him all trip. Keep it, he said. I think I've got my own now. He placed his hand over his heart. I smiled. On each person's back, I stuck a tiny label, a goofy farewell sticker, Passport to Earth. The real passport isn't in your wallet. They drifted into the airport crowds one by one. I stood for a moment watching my Passport to Earth sign reflected in the glass door. Outside, the world kept spinning. People would ask again why December is hot in Sydney, why waterfalls don't have switches, why some cheeses don't have holes, why borders don't spare the nice ones. And I'll keep answering. Not to prove I'm right, but to help someone reach their next question. I folded my map, slipped the globe into my bag, and lifted my sign. The next group was waiting. A new class, a new quiz. More questions that seem naive until they open a smarter door. And as always, I started with the same line, passports, please. Then I added softly, don't forget the passport in your heart, the one that lets you enter someone else's story. Passport to Earth. Because traveling in the end isn't about seeing what you already knew, it's about being humble before what others take for granted. Until one day it becomes what you take for granted too.